Welcome to Michigan in Focus. I'm Bruce Walker, Great Lakes Regional Editor for the Center Square. President Joe Biden's administration has proposed 2 revised federal standards for air and water. Talking to me today about both are the Center Square Managing Editor, Tom Gantert, and the Center Square Michigan reporter, Scott McClellan. Tom, let's begin with you. What exactly is the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency, a.k.a. the EPA, proposing?
That on light and heavy-duty vehicle for greenhouse gas emissions, that they would reduce that by 56% by 2032. And they also hope to increase electric vehicle light-duty sales by 67% by 2032. That's the gist behind what they're hoping to do.
What they're trying to do then is to force the hand of consumers to purchase more electric vehicles.
Right. And there's some critics of this that say that basically this will effectively ban gasoline and diesel vehicles because the standards will be so tough to meet by car makers.
You know, I've been around the block a couple of times, and I used to work for the automotive industry. And back in the 90s, there were people who were all afeared that the corporate average fuel economy standards were going to do pretty much the same thing, ban automobiles, because in order to get decent mileage, they started taking away the weight of cars and changing the shape of cars so that what they were is what I used to call the jelly bean shape, and to cut down wind resistance and the weight of the vehicle, which had the negative unforeseen consequence of making the cars less safe, because NHTSA, the National Highway and Traffic Safety Administration, required all of these safety apparatus on vehicles that are relatively heavy when compared to the rest of the vehicle.
We talked to Henry Payne, who you know is the auto columnist for the Detroit News, and he compared it, what the Biden administration is doing, to the Prohibition era. And he called it the second temperance movement, where there is this movement to ban carbon-emitting products and portray them as immoral. And he said the effects are being felt already as Dodge has discontinued its Challenger and Daytona cars. To me, there's a bigger issue, and that is if you want people to buy electric vehicles, then if you want everyone to buy an electric vehicle, then there has to be a reduction in the cost of the vehicle.
Right. They have to be affordable.
The cheapest electric vehicle cars right now is the Chevrolet Bolt EV, $26,500, and the Nissan Leaf at $28,040. The best-selling EV is a Tesla Model Y, a base sticker price of $52,990. Now, if you want to get a Chevrolet Bolt and you get $1,000 down, have an average credit rating, 72 months, it's $503 a month. If you want to get a Tesla down, buy a Tesla Model Y, the most popular selling EV. $1,000 down, 72 months, average credit rating is $1,024 a month. That's with a 12% interest rate. Now, there's not a lot of people out there right now with good credit ratings. Average credit rating, maybe, but for most of the low-income people, a lot of the low-income people, it's tough to have an average credit rating with inflation and what they're dealing with. So it's going to be very tough for the people making $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 and less to afford an electric vehicle at the prices they are right now. And I think that should be more of a concern for the industry, is that your prices right now can't be met by the bulk of the buying public.
Right. And Scott, you've written a little bit as well on the downside of electric vehicles, including you can't drive them very far without a recharge, and there's not a whole lot of recharging stations available. Say if you wanted to take a trip up north and put your tent and your fly fishing gear in the back and head up for a week with no charging stations. So then what do you do? And you brought up several other pertinent topics on this. So why don't you enlighten us?
Currently, Michigan has a very limited electric vehicle charging network, and that's even more complicated. In cold weather, electric vehicles tend to lose a lot of range. It could be up to 50% of the range. So that is part of the federal government's spending on electric vehicle chargers to kind of calm range anxiety.
Not only that, but it's the precious and rare minerals that are needed to build EV batteries.
Yeah, the United States does not have much of those rare earth minerals. So we import them from other countries, mostly South America, where these minerals could be mined by slaves. So that's kind of the rub there with electric vehicles.
Right. And we're also seeing some of the anxiety with some of the companies that are partnering with OEMs, original equipment manufacturers here in Michigan, being from China. And there's some anxiety and tension about that. But that's a topic for another podcast. So something similar, Tom, that's happened, the second EPA regulation that is making a return trip to the policymakers at the Environmental Protection Agency is the Waters of the United States, or WOTUS, as it's been dubbed. And the EPA and the Army Corps of Engineers have published a rule in January that brings the country's wetlands, streams, and other waterways under federal jurisdiction. The rule was implemented during the Obama administration, repealed under the Trump administration. Now it's back. And this week, North Dakota U.S. District Court Judge Daniel Hovland issued a preliminary injunction that blocked the implementation of the Clean Water Rule, which is also known as WOTUS. So the judge said claims by North Dakota and West Virginia officials that the rule would cause their agencies harm outweighed the harm the injunction could do. So a little bit of background. Here in Michigan, we had a court case that was John Rapanos that went all the way to the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court more or less whiffed on this. The Army Corps of Engineers and the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality fined John Rapanos in Midland County for basically filling a ditch on his property. And they said that he couldn't do that because it was a waterway. And the definition of waterway was very, very problematic at that point in time. They said that it had to be a navigable waterway. And he said it was not a navigable waterway because, well, it was a ditch. So anyway, the judge in North Dakota has put a stay on this, and we'll have to see what goes on with this in the future. So listeners can keep up with this story and more at thecentersquare.com. This is Bruce Walker, Great Lakes Regional Editor for The Center Square. Please subscribe, and thank you for listening.